Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Sit back and listen to interviews, discussion about books, and anything else literary. There's always something or someone new on the show. There we go. Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Behind the books, honest voices, real stories. I'm Amy Shannon, and each episode brings you heartfelt conversations with the storytellers behind the stories, authors, publishers, and creatives who shape the literary world. And every second Sunday, join me for story time where tales come alive for all ages. Let's turn the page together. Tonight, we have an author with us, and would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Amy. This is Mark Gray, and I am the author of The Las Vegas Massacre Connections, Finding Strength Through Tragedy After America's Deadliest Mass Shooting.
Yeah, wow. That is, did you have a website or social media you wanted to share with the listeners?
Yeah, we're on Instagram and TikTok, and we have a website. It's all the Las Vegas Massacre Connections.
Oh, okay. So,
every life.
This, yeah, I mean, I saw it on TV. That was it. What drew you to this? Were you there? I'm just trying to, what made you want to tell this story?
Yeah, so I was there that night on October 1st, 2017. I was there that evening, so I should back up and tell you that I am a journalist by trade. I've written for People magazine for, about 19 years or so, and I've written for Rolling Stone in some capacity or another for probably about 10 years or so. So I was there that evening on October 1st, 2017, covering for Rolling Stone. It was a music festival called the Route 91 Harvest Festival, and the story was initially going to be the 10 best things I saw that evening. During the 3-day festival. Jason Aldean was the artist that evening on the last act of the last day, and so my story that was initially supposed to be written was basically done. It was pretty much finished. I was waiting to have a part in there for Jason Aldean since he was a headliner. Felt like that should be an item, and so he ended up. I was there doing the. Sorry, my computer's going crazy. So I was there saying I was doing the story, and obviously things changed pretty dramatically. I first heard 3 shots, and they were really in quick succession, pop, 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 and there was a pause. And then there was another pop, 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 and then a pause. And then the barrage of bullets started happening, and it was just 11 minutes of just relentless shooting. And pretty quickly, you realize something wasn't right. We didn't really know. None of us really at that time certainly knew what was going on. We knew it was not good. We kind of assumed it was a shooting.
Right.
Some people thought the shooting was coming from the ground. People were inside the festival, which is kind of what I thought at the time. We didn't know was it one shooter, multiple shooters, or anything. And so I got home that evening, and I wasn't really quite sure what I was supposed to do. You're still you're dazed, because you're not quite sure what has happened in the last, several hours of your life.
Right.
And, so I just decided to write a story, a first-person experience, what I personally did, what I went through that evening. And it was, I feel like you never see a lot of those in print journalism. You see that certainly on TV, when you're watching CNN or Fox or wherever you're watching, you see the reporter talk to somebody and say, what was it like? And the person explains what happened, and then, they cut away to commercial, and you never see that person again. To me, there's something different about living in print. It lives forever in print. And so that was what I did that evening, and sent it to Rolling Stone. I closed my laptop. I never read the story, still have not to this day. And that was that. But the story ended up doing really, really well. It was just apparently very raw, and it's just something you don't really see after these kind of tragedies. And so fast forward about 4.5 years later, and I got a call from Rolling Stone again saying, hey, the 5-year anniversary is coming up. So this was obviously in 2022.
Right.
And we want you to do a story on the 5-year anniversary of the shooting and kind of talk to some of the victims and talk to, whoever. And so I did that. So I went to, a lot of the victims go to a particular baseball game every year. It's kind of strange, but they would go to this one particular Angels baseball game, and they'd all, get there and hang out and tailgate and whatever.
Right.
So I went. So they sent me out there for one particular game. I tailgated with these people. I chatted with them. A lot of them, didn't want to speak to me until they found out I was there, and they said, "Oh, he's one of us."
Right.
And so that was the situation. So I was there in the game, and I met this woman. She was sitting in front of me. Her name is Mary Jo Vontillo, and Mary Jo really in the initial part didn't want anything to do with me. And, thankfully baseball is a very long game, and that's why I had 9 innings to break her down. And so she eventually agreed to speak to me briefly about her experience. Now, Mary Jo was there that evening with her family, and her husband, Kurt Vontillo, was shot in the collarbone, and the bullet went to his heart. He was dead instantaneously.
Oh my God.
And there's no way of really knowing this, but it's quite likely that he was the first person fatally shot. Now, we only say that because when Kurt went down, Jason Aldean was still on stage singing. And so we know that it was very, very early in the shooting. But, so I met Mary Jo, and, Joseph told me that her niece got shot that night, her sister-in-law got shot that night. Now, both those two women lived, but Kurt obviously did not. So I, chatted with Mary Jo at this baseball game and got her story, which was, obviously just, what a horrific situation. And a year later, my phone rang one day, and it was Mary Jo, and she said, I have this idea for a book, and I was interested in chatting with you to see if maybe you're interested in writing it. And that's really kind of how this thing started. And so I flew to her home, which at the time she lived in Southern California. And I live in Las Vegas. And she went out there, I went out there rather, and we chatted all day long, had a very deep conversation about, her life with Kurt that evening, in Las Vegas. And the history in Las Vegas together, the history in dating, just really kind of check all the boxes I tried to. And I left that meeting still not knowing if we have, do we have a book, the start of a book? Do we have is this a news story? Is this just a friendly conversation with a lovely woman? I didn't know what I really had yet.
Yeah.
And as time went on, we chatted more, and I talked to more of her family and started realizing there might be something here. And so that's kind of what happened. And over the course of about a year, we kind of got this project together where we said, let's do this story about, what can happen after something so horrific happens to you. And you can certainly wallow in sadness, or you can actually kind of find a silver lining in it. And Mary Jo's silver lining was all these people she met because of that day, because of that event, that she never would have met otherwise. Right. And all of these people had gone through a similar type of trauma, whether it's, murder, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's, natural disasters or anything of this nature. Right. And she met these people who went through these horrific traumas and came out the other side and made something good of their life and, move forward with their life. And, right. And that's what helped her get past October 1, 2017 was, kind of like leaning into these people and saying, how did you move forward with your life after something so awful happened to you? And that's what the book is about. It's about kind of, again, finding that silver lining, finding strength and healing and hope after something that, happened to you through no fault of your own.
Right. So she had this idea after, you know, so it was just kind of I was just wondering, I was thinking before you explained that, what made her all of a sudden say, we should tell more people about this. We should put something together and let people know what's going on, or what happens after. So, it sounds like you kind of answered my question before I asked. but,
What we did with this too, I'll do real quick. One thing that I kind of set out to do in this thing was, being that I was there also, this happened on October 1st. On October 2nd, we were talking about how this book actually, it's not a Route 91 book per se. It starts at Route 91 and works its way after that. But, what we really say is on October 2nd, a lot of us needed someone to basically tell us, it's going to be okay. And there was no one there to say that. There was no one there doing that for us. And so we really hope this book kind of becomes a little bit of a roadmap for people in future traumas. Again, whether that trauma is, hopefully nothing that what we went through, but,
right.
Trauma can really be anything. And we hope this can really help people through, and, they can read these stories of hope and, forgiveness and all these kind of things and say, like this person did it, I can do it too.
I mean, that sounds, actually, I think that would be very helpful to a lot of people who don't know what to do with it. 20 years ago, I was a victim of domestic violence where my husband almost murdered me. And it took all the strength I had to survive that moment, but even to just push forward. And I had a lot of obstacles to get him to get justice, but I prevailed and he did. He got justice and then he died, so I got more justice. And my kids were safe. To me, that was the most important thing. But I can understand thinking about, whatever situation. I can't imagine dodging bullets. But for that, I couldn't imagine of what happened to me happening to me. So, I get some days are worse than others, even though you're making it through. And sometimes I'm sure that, losing your husband probably right in front of her, and her other family members getting shot, thank goodness they survived, but, not just being shot at, but seeing what happens when you are shot. I mean, not everybody, knows what that's like, to dodge bullets or see somebody, get murdered right in front of their eyes and have it be a family member. And then you're worried about your other family members. And then, even if you weren't injured, what you experienced injured you, in a different way. So I wonder how her two relatives, would you say her sister and her niece?
Her sister-in-law and her niece, yes.
That, they were shot and survived, and how they fared because, they were literally shot. And so I just wonder if that kind of brought them, if they were, obviously it seems like they were close because they all went to this concert festival together. If it brought them closer, and did they have each other to help them through, and, not just, like you said, like a group of people, but I just wondered about, her family.
Yeah, they're fiercely close family. They were before that. They still are to this day. In fact, I was just in Mary Jo was just in Las Vegas for the anniversary of October 1, would have been the 8th anniversary this past October, and she was there with her sister-in-law and Deanne, and so they're still as close as ever. They have just both these women have an incredible outlook. I mean, Deanne lost her, she got shot and she lost her brother, and of course Mary Jo didn't get shot, but she lost her husband of 33 years, and so it really these women are true inspirations to really all of us. I mean, I really marvel at who they are because I'm not sure that I would have the strength to go on and live a fulfilling life if this happened to me. And they are really walking, just walking examples that you can kind of still be okay and find that silver lining.
Yeah, and it makes you think about the others that survived, even if they weren't shot. They were anyone who was there. I can imagine just running in fear for your life and people tripping over each other and just trying to get safe and they didn't know where any of the shots were coming. So it was like, okay, where do I go?
Yeah. We all saw some things that night that we wish we never saw. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I honestly, I can't even imagine something like that. And though, unfortunately, that stuff happens a lot lately and for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah. These events don't seem to be stopping, unfortunately, and that's where we think this book might come into play a little bit. Is again, it goes back to what I talked about a second ago. Is it's kind of this roadmap of you can go through these things and read about these people who've also been through some really horrific events in their life, and they chose to kind of like flip it on its head and make something out of their life because of these moments, and that's what all these people featured in this book do, is where every chapter is a different person that's come into Mary Jo's life because of that day, because of October 1. And some of these chapters have overlap, some don't, but Mary Jo is the thread who connects all these people together.
Wow. And I think it's very commendable that she managed to share her story with you and then continue on and move forward and do everything she's doing and be grateful for what she has and probably what she had with her husband. That was probably something that she will always cherish, even though, the way that's not the way you say goodbye to somebody, but I'm sure she just carries him with her.
Yeah. That's it's interesting you say that about the saying goodbye part. There's, and this is not really the point of the book, but the Vegas shooting is so interesting because there are so many things that are unknown, and we can't even agree on how many people were shot, were killed that night, or killed because of it. Now, there's two numbers that float around, and it's 58 and 60, and there's a reason for both, and I can really briefly explain now. There are people who live in the 58 camp, and I'm one of them, that say 58 people died that night. Now, there were 60 deaths, but those two other people died because of injuries. They died, a year and a half, 2 years later from injuries suffered that evening. And I understand why they would want to be a part of that number, that 60 number. I get that. But the whole logic for what a lot of people feel, certainly that were there that night, is numbers 58. And the reason why is because 58 people didn't get a chance 58 people died that night.
Right.
60 died because of that night. 58 families did not get a chance to say goodbye, whereas two others did. And that's, honestly, in many ways, you wish you were there, those two other families, because you got to say goodbye, whereas the others, someone like Mary Jo did not get that chance.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like Gunman knew exactly what he was doing. Like, there's no reason for something like that, and it's disturbing, and I hope that no one gets used to that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes, when things go on the news and they're terrible and we're like, oh, this happens all the time. And, unless you're directly involved, you think that, you know, what else is new? But me, I'm just, every time there's something like that, and I'm the kind of person that just cares about other human beings, whether I know them or not. So I mourn with them, and, just find it disheartening that there are people out there that could actually do that. And then I am very grateful for the ones who do survive and are able to live a life. It may not be the exact same thing as it was before the trauma, but also having remembrances and, memorials and things like that. I think those also help people heal. Um, you'll never get over that loss, but you can kind of carry it with you.
Yeah. That's one thing that this book is so interesting, I think, is that it really kind of blends true crime with inspiration. I don't think those two things overlap all that often. And that's kind of what this is sort of about, because there's no question there's a true crime element that runs in a lot of these chapters. And there's also, an inspirational element that runs through all of them as well. One thing, and I've been asked this question a little bit, about this book is, what did you find out about the shooting? And I tell them the same thing, is that number one, this book, again, it's not really about the shooting. It's about, this is a story of victims, and, truly a story about victims, because we've seen, there's certainly books out there about the Vegas shooting. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, I think they're all, self-published, but I'm not quite sure about that. But all of them, what I've seen at least, they focus on the shooter, or they focus on from a first responder standpoint.
Right.
And we didn't go that route. We went the route of the victims, because I think in a lot of things, like a lot of times, victims are the things that get, the people who get forgotten. Like you get so hung up on these numbers of, 800 people injured and 58 people dead, and you kind of forget that that's 58 families and 800 people over here. And we deliberately chose two things that when going into this was that we said we're not going to name the shooter, because this person doesn't get that kind of respect. And number two, we're not going to relitigate this shooting at all. We're not going to go deep into, what we think the motive was. Now, there are so many, police documents and FBI documents and things like that. I've read through all of them. I have combed through every one of them, just to kind of figure out what they think happened. Now, again, this wasn't this wasn't an expose on the shooting. This is, again, just about victims and what these people go through because of one man, twitching trigger finger. And that's kind of what we hope we accomplished with this. Was we're really trying to get away from not the why of it all, but the who of it all. Certainly, we want to definitely get away from that part and focus again just on the people who this actually affected, because this guy's dead now. It hasn't affected him. He took the easy way out. All these other people, myself included, have to live with this every day.
Yeah, survivors.
Yep.
That's how I look at them. When it's kind of like, I think of victims as being ones that don't survive, and then survivors are not just the people who survive, but they can continue to move forward and not stay in that. Because I'm sure there are people that just get stuck in that moment, and it's hard to break out of. So, I'm looking, I have your book. I haven't started it, but it's definitely one I'm going to read and, review, but I'm really glad that I was able to talk to you about these things. And I know, how did, this is probably personal, but I know you wrote things and you put things down on paper. Did you find that helped you, kind of for yourself moving forward?
In the early days, the answer is yes. And that, I didn't realize it at the time, but, that night, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, was I went home that night and I wrote a first person story for Rolling Stone and sent it in. And it was one of those things where it helped me really almost immediately get it out. And I wasn't holding anything in anymore because all was out there and it was so quick. So it really kind of helped me get, everyone has a different process, and that was my process, was write it down, get it out, and hopefully start this, unfortunate new chapter in my life.
Yeah.
Post shooting chapter. And so I did a bunch of things like that, and I really kind of delved into a lot of the Vegas of it all too, because Vegas really, people think of Las Vegas, they think of casinos and glitz and glamour, and that's all true. That does exist. But there were so many other things that were going on, of like, from the community standpoint of, blood banks and, and benefits and, donations and things like that. And then really go deep into that stuff. And that really helped me too to kind of, just see that we're not alone in this. And this affected certainly all the people that were there, but this affected a city. Yeah, it really was. I mean, it really was kind of like in a funeral for an entire city was going on in those early days. And so, kind of writing it all down really helped me, in those early days. And even this book, I don't want to say you're never healed, I don't think, but you're certainly on the path towards healing, I think. And this book helped me, again, look at other people and say, oh wow, you guys, you've gone through some really horrific things, really tragic things, and look at you now. And I think this book might be my thing, where, wow, Mark, you've gone through something really terrible, and look at you now. Like now you have a book out, you're published author, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of, become my process.
Yeah, and I can see that, because I know, as a writer myself, that sometimes it's just putting something down on paper, no matter what it is it's an outlet, and it's not about, and like you were talking about, how people experienced different traumas, but they came together. And sometimes someone might think, oh, well, my trauma is not as bad as that person's trauma, but, or I'm much worse off than that person. And it sounds like there's no comparing traumas, so one is worse than the other. Everybody has their own things in their life, and bad things happen, unfortunately, and they all whatever happens affect people. But, at least, I think something like this would, and when people read it, they'll realize too that it, you don't have to compare traumas. I mean, a trauma is a trauma, no matter what.
There's no trophy for the worst trauma, that's for sure.
No, there's not. And I used to think that for a while for myself, because I have PTSD because of what happened to me. But I would think, well, soldiers have that, military, they get PTSD. And I'm like, well, I'm not as bad as them, so, and then I feel guilty. Why do I have PTSD? And they've been through so much worse. But, it really comes down to, you just can't compare trauma. It's how you move forward and embrace those who share similar stories.
Yeah.
I think this is from everything you've explained, and I will be reading this very soon, that this book has got to help other people too, and I'm sure the people that were involved in it's helped them in some way as well.
So what they say, it's all cliche, but if this book helps one person, I think we've done our job.
Yeah. And that may sound it, but I think it's true, at least, and my guess is that it helped the people that were involved. So you've already helped them. You've helped yourself, and you aren't, you didn't shy away from this. You persevered. I mean, you're a survivor as well. You were there. So I commend you for being able to move forward and, come to this point where you've written your story and you're telling other people's stories, and the focus is not on the person, the perpetrator, but the survivors and the victims and what those people were going through, what you went through. So I really think that this is, I'm sure this helps you in more ways than you probably even know.
Yeah, I think this is, we all have a silver lining, I think. That's what this book is about. And, again, this book is my silver lining, is to be able to put this out there for the world to see. And I've always wanted to be a published author, and I got it.
Yes, you certainly did. You got it the hard way, but you did it.
I got it the hard way, that's for sure. Yeah, I didn't get it the way I thought it'd happen, but, we got it out.
But, the hard way is sometimes it's when you work hard and go through hardship and to get to your point in life that, it makes it more, I don't know, more satisfying. I don't know if that's the right word, but, it obviously wasn't an easy process, and it was something personal. So having to do this, I'm glad that, for one, you survived and that you were able to help yourself and help the other survivors.
Yeah. And they say, that old adage that write what you know. And I was there, and this is what I know.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to thank you for being on the show. And I'll just wrap up here, but do you have another book coming out or any you want to talk again? Feel free to reach out, and I would love to have you back.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Amy.
You're welcome. It's the end of another great conversation. Thank you for being on the show, and thank you, audience, for listening. If you wish for you or your book to be on the show, just go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast and schedule your pre-recording. Please follow this podcast on Spotify. I'm Amy Shannon. Be safe, be well, and always be kind.
Tune in here again next week for another tantalizing discussion. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast.